When you're working on a mix, it's really easy to get stuck chasing sounds. You keep tweaking, adding plugins, trying different ideas, and it always takes way longer than it should to actually land on something that feels right. That's exactly why I built my plugin company, Kari Jobe. We create plugins that help you get the sound that you're hearing in your head much, much faster, and without all of the extra steps that typically come along in the process. We've got the Smashburger compressor, which gives you punch, control, and character all in one place, so you're not having to stack multiple plugins just to shape a sound. We also have Busboy, which helps you dial in your buses quickly with EQ, compression, and limiting, so your mix starts to feel finished way faster. Then we have Slapshot, which gives you space and width, but without the mud and harshness that you typically have to fight using tools like delay and reverb. And then lastly, we have the Gas Can amp, which lets you instantly tap into raw, gritty, blown-out tones that sound great on guitars, drums, keys, and vocals. Each plugin is built to help you move faster, stay more focused, and actually enjoy the process instead of getting stuck in it. Now you can grab them all individually or get everything with the all-in bundle at the best value. And if you already own any of our plugins, just log into your account, add the bundle to your cart, and you're going to see a personal upgrade discount automatically applied. So if you want to stop chasing sounds and start landing on them much faster, make sure to check out the Carve Audio plugins at carvaudio.com. And if you want to try any of them first, every plugin has a 14-day free trial too. So once again, that's carvaudio.com. Hey, welcome to the Master Your Mix podcast. My name is Mike Navina, and thanks for hanging out with me today. Today, my guest is Sam Moses, and if you're not familiar with him, he is a mastering engineer based out of Nashville who has worked on gold and platinum records, Grammy Award-winning records. He's worked with artists like Jelly Roll, who one of the recent songs he worked on just won a Grammy for that. He's worked with people like Dolly Parton, Kesha, Ray Cyrus. He's done stuff in the CCM world, stuff in the metalcore world. He's all over the place as far as the kind of clients that he works on. He's just an amazing engineer. I really love the work that he does. And today we get into his process. We talk about how he makes records feel finished. That's kind of like his way of marketing himself, is that he's the guy who is going to help you finish your record. And we talk about what that really means and how artists have a goal that they want to achieve with their music. They want it to sound a certain way. They want it to have a certain feel, resonate a certain way. And Sam's job is to really help people at that last stage of the production process to make sure that that goal comes together. And so we get into how he makes that happen. And when he talks about his process, he has some pretty interesting approaches, especially around the concept of metering and how there's actually 3 different measurements that he pays attention to that without listening to the song, you can already know how the song is going to sound. And when you pay attention to those values, it allows you to have direction in terms of what to do in the mastering process so that ultimately those things help fulfill that goal that the artists want. It's going to compete against the songs that they like and admire the quality of. And so this isn't a mastering by numbers episode, definitely not that. But the advice that Sam shares here really gives you a clear starting point with all this stuff to help make sure that you're doing what's needed. So yeah, I think this is a really interesting episode. So yeah, we definitely get into his process. We get into that measurement system. We talk about his road into mastering and a lot of the challenges that he faced along the way, and even how he learned how to market himself so that he can differentiate himself from other people too. So I just think there's so much good stuff in here from a mastering perspective, from a marketing perspective, from a listening perspective. So much good stuff. So with that said, let's just jump right into it. Sam Moses, thank you so much for being on the MasterYourMix podcast. How's it going today, man?
It's going well, Mike. Thank you so much for having me. Always a gift to talk to great people like you.
Thank you, man. I appreciate that. For people who might not be familiar with you, can you give us your background on who you are, what you do, and how you got into all this stuff?
Sure. I am Sam Moses. I own Moses Mastering, which is a mastering business. I like to tell people I finish records. That's what I do. I live in Nashville, Tennessee. I have been in Nashville for 14 years. And I have been mastering, or I'll say getting paid to master, for 16 years. And before that, I was in a band like 20 years ago. And that's kind of my music journey of how I got into music, was playing in a band. And I thought I was going to be a rock star and do all that. And we cut a record and we got offered a record deal in Nashville. This was back when I lived in Chicago. And as soon as we saw the stars aligning and offered a record deal, our band fell apart. Classic band drama.
That's exactly what happens. Yeah, been there.
Literally multiple years of wonderful making records, shows, building the thing, getting in front of, back then in Nashville, we got asked to come down for an industry showcase is what it was called. And then it was at the Rutledge, which is no longer a venue downtown, unfortunately. And that was like label people came to shows to watch just a bunch of bands play live. Like they had our record already, like a press kit, and they sent their A&Rs and management there to see like, can this band play? Is this band good? And we did that with like 5 other bands. And then we got a call, the call you want. The logistics of trying to figure out, getting from Chicago to Nashville to tour and band dynamics. The longest story short is it didn't work out. Classic. And so
sometimes when you're forced with those kind of like, oh shit, this is happening moments,
yeah, it
really forces you to think about like, are we aligned in this vision together?
Yeah. So we all parted ways, some neutrally, some not. And I had just gotten married and found myself with no future. Like I was really banking on being a rock star. The young, naive, thought. And this was like in college, right out of college. And so when that happened, then I went back to the people that helped us make the record, engineers, producers, a couple people, and basically said, hey, you know what happened? Like, we have a really pretty good record. We were a good band, and this didn't work out. So can I watch you? Can I shadow you? What is engineering? What is producing? What is mastering?
Were you interested in that side of things, or was it just like that just felt like the only option left in music?
I was interested because at that time in the band, I was the guitar player, but I was doing like beat making. So this would have been, 20 years ago, like in Logic is what I started in. And I was making hip hop beats too. And I was also playing electric guitar for a hip hop artist in Chicago at the time too.
Oh, cool.
And so I was kind of in and out of studios with rappers and with that artist, just because we were kind of learning parts or playing parts. But I was definitely interested in it. I just was more interested at that, I'll say younger age of, being like, I'm going to be on stage and be cool, arenas.
Yes.
So then the big like light bulb moment was more so, I just remember how much we paid all these, the engineers up front. Regardless of us getting famous or not, or them working with us or said big band, they got the same rate. And I remember, I don't know if it's one of those things where like you get put in a corner and you got to figure out what you're doing, and being like, broke as a joke, student loan debt, got married. My wife and I lived in the house with the band. There's 6 of us in one house. And the downstairs guest was a Craigslist guest we found. And the fun thing about that story is he became an engineer and I master his records. And I met him on Craigslist in a Chicago Craigslist one ad back in the day.
Amazing.
I feel so old because like there was internet, but not
Yeah.
So it was Craigslist, somebody looking for a roommate who seemed like a normal person. And we interviewed him essentially as a house, and he lived downstairs in a utility room. It was what it was. It wasn't a legal bedroom. But anyway, I say that because it was like, I need money. That was really my thought. Was like, we spent all this money on this record. We're getting basically no return. I thought I had my future planned out, getting married, got married, and we got bills. And I just remember what we paid the engineers, and I thought, man, if I could do a third of that rate, it would be amazing. Like it'd be better than, at the time too, I was working at a salon and spa, working a front desk in Chicago, which is one of my favorite jobs. I took any job I could. Like it was just whoever would hire a dumb music kid. And that's who hired me, and it became one of my favorite jobs I ever had, actually, for a couple of years. And I still talk to the owner, actually, Maria. She's awesome.
Awesome.
But yeah, I think, I went back to those guys and just said, hey, can I be a shadow on the wall? I need to make money. I want to learn what this is about. And I just mainly started then making more beats, hip hop beats and stuff, and then recording rappers, learning how to engineer rappers. And then my wife and I moved back to our hometown. We were in Chicago, moved back to Bloomington Normal, Illinois, just 2 hours south of Chicago, because we just couldn't afford Chicago. And the band broke up, the house split up. And so we moved into, it was honestly a Section 8 apartment living, a month to month type place. And I started I started making beats for rappers in that town or surrounding area at the only studio there. And then the guy who owned that studio, Eric, it's a clip studio is what it's called. And it's just a small, like 2-room studio, but such a kind guy, so talented. And he was a do-it-all guy. And that's in that town, of 100,000 people, like, you're not going to have a lot of options. We were lucky to have a decent studio with a guy who knew some things. And, I connected with him and just watched him for like a year. And then eventually he asked if I wanted to start helping on some stuff, and was helping out with a few of his records. But I had started to build my own client base. And this was engineering, producing, and I was mixing and mastering. So the mastering really started there of like,
okay.
We were running and gunning sessions a lot, which meant like someone would come in for my rate. It was $20 an hour, and it didn't matter what the skill set was. Someone would come in with $60. They'd have a beat off YouTube or a beat I'd make. They'd want the finished song when they left, that sort of situation, which was really great for my skill set. Like, it's a hot seat 24/7 when you do that. And you have to learn how to basically record and mix at the same time and then master while you're mixing. It's not ideal, but it forced me to really learn quickly, the main thing that I still carry with me for mastering, which is essentially like, am I emotionally connected to this record? That's it. Like, back then, that was how I started to think about things. And, instead of like focusing so much on how loud it was or metering or compression, because I didn't really know that back then. I watched basically my experience of mastering then was watching what appeared to be what most people think it is 2-bus processing. I watched a guy put a limiter with a thing and a limiter and just drag. We burn it to a CD, put it next to Jay-Z or 50 Cent in the CD changer and hope it was similar. And the client would check it. That was something we did. Like, we'd burn the CD, you'd walk out, you'd put it in the car. A lot of people had 6-disc CD changers by then, or, people that like music put a lot of money into their car, subs.
I still do have a 6-disc CD player in my car.
It's amazing. Yeah. I did too. I have a 2002 Sequoia, and I just this year decided to do a full update. So like, I got 2 subs, 6 new speakers, it's so good. But I got rid of a 6-disc and got a nice Sony thing.
A plus.
It's pretty raw. It's actually amazing because I have, it's a master engineer thing. I have the setup I wanted to be able to control crossovers and time alignment of the speakers. So in my car, I could master out of like.
That's amazing.
I may or may not have done that for a client or 2 or 3. Don't tell anybody. It's the car check, but it's very accurate.
Yeah, it's like, why not mix in your car if you can do it, right?
Anyway, they take it to their car, put it in with the 6 CD changer and flip through, and if it wasn't as loud, they'd come back in and basically say, it doesn't sound right. It doesn't sound right meant 50 Cent sounded louder, or something, or whatever the artist. Mm-hmm. So we just take that limiter and just another dB or 2, burn the CD. But that was called mastering, and that was what it was. It was finishing. We were finishing the record. And that was a big aha moment for me years ago when I was getting into mastering. It just has always seemed so confusing. Like, dark art, fairy dust, we don't know what happens. It sounds better, but we don't know why. Or a lot of times we got it back, it sounds worse. What is this skill set, essentially? And I'm a very problem-solving type person where I'm like, I'll figure it out, which is a little cocky. And as I've gotten older, I've learned I don't know everything, and there's lots of unknown in life, and that's fine. It's great. Makes life a little more interesting.
Yeah.
But, as a 21-year-old or whatever, like, I was like, I'll figure it out. Like, there's got to be we know how to record a drum kit, and explain that. And we know how to mix pretty well. Like, we explained that. And then when it got to mastering, people were like, I don't know. What is this? And so I just started watching and thinking, I think it was a gift of like, I didn't know anything really about it. And the people I watched initially were not mastering engineers. So I just observed this next step and then realized people really seem to be concerned about it sounding as loud, as the next record. And so I kind of became obsessed with that, like loudness. And I didn't even know, when we're talking about loudness, what we're talking about is compression, more loud, more often is what I tell people. That's what compression is essentially. It's making things on average more loud, more often. And that's really what got me into it. And then from there, I did a couple years in West Palm Beach, Florida. We moved there because after kind of just like, I was just burnt out from doing the band thing right into the studio thing. And I had some not so nice clients threaten me. I said this before in a different interview, and I was doing a song at my apartment and mixing it after I recorded it, and they wanted me to swap this 808 out line. And I had been like, back then it was like, I was spending days on a mix, just like overthinking, not knowing quite how to do it. Like anybody, you start somewhere, and,
yep.
and I remember just doing like 8 versions for them with this 808 line. And the whole song, it's a rap song. So it's like an 808, a snare, a synth pad, and vocals, So it's pretty much the song. And I based everything around the bass, essentially. And then they wanted a whole new bass line, and they sent it to me, and I was like, I need like $20 more. It was like that. And they threatened to come to our apartment, my wife and I, with like a gun. And they were like, you're going to do it. They were like, we're coming.
Over $20.
Yeah, like $20. That's like how
That's insane. If you're a fan of the Master Your Mix podcast, you might not even know yet that we actually have a full website packed with a ton of resources designed to help you make better mixes. So head on over to MasterYourMix.com, and on there you're going to find free downloads, cheat sheets, blog articles, books, courses, and a whole bunch more, all designed to help simplify your mixing process, give you more clarity, and help you finish more music without second-guessing every move. And then, if you're looking for more personalized one-on-one help, where I can work directly with you on your tracks and walk you through the recording, editing, and mixing processes step by step, that's exactly what I work on inside of my coaching program, Amplitude. And you can learn more about that at masteryourmix.com/amplitude. And on that page, you can book a free call with me where we can talk through your current process, figure out where your gaps are, and identify the fastest ways to help you move forward with your tracks. And then if it makes sense to work together beyond that call, we can absolutely talk about that too. So once again, that's masteryourmix.com. And then for coaching, masteryourmix.com/amplitude.
Small town rap world, rap scene. So that was like, I just ended up not doing it. But like within a few weeks, my wife and I were just like, this seems not sustainable. Like, this seems like a rough go. I don't know if I'm cut out for this. And we moved to West Palm Beach. I took a job at a church, actually, doing like audio stuff, creative stuff. And then I worked at a studio with one of the guys that was at the church, was in a band called 10th Avenue North, which was like a big Christian CCM band. And after, you don't quote me on it, it was either the first or second record they got done. He had a kid and wanted to get off the road, essentially, and open a studio. And they're based out of West Palm Beach. And so he was doing like a teaching, like such talented guy. Danny is his name, Danny Zayas. Shout out to Danny Zayas. Plays every instrument, can write, sing, and we hit it off after playing together on a weekend. And he basically was like, hey, I have these students and I think you should like help me produce and make songs with them. and like introduce that to the studio side, and let's build like a little room, like a bedroom essentially. He had like a commercial space, but let's build a room that can be our studio room, like what you're in basically. And it was great. So we built that up, and then I started producing, mixing, mastering, and he was writing, producing with me. Learned a ton from him. But once again, kind of got back into the music thing again. I at least had a paycheck. My wife ended up becoming the manager of that studio, managing that for them. And just over those couple years, really kind of fell in love with not making rap. I adore rap, and I do a lot of it now. But through that, I went to mix with the masters, because at that time, I think I wanted to produce and mix, and mastering was something I could offer, but I really liked working with bands and artists. And so I went to mix with the masters in France. Like, I think it was maybe the first year they'd done that program. And Joe Barisi was my guy. And Andrew Sheps was also there. Back then they had like a 2-for-1 going on. So Andrew was there, Joe was there. Yeah, it was sweet. And polar opposite people, And I actually picked Joe as who I applied to be with, because I really knew nothing about, I never really had a great experience, I'll say, of being able to observe how do you record bands, and Joe's like a engineer god, and creativity. I did some research, and I was just like, this guy is all about making things not boring, and technique, and recording people in a toilet, and all the, dog barking and he time stretches it, and it's a bass drop, like all these things. And I'm kind of that way. I'm like a weird, I don't know, I just like tinkering. I'm a tinkerer. And like, what if we did it this way? What does that sound like? Like an obsession with listening, and then how does that equal manipulation of emotion in audio? So I picked him, and they accepted my application or whatever back then, and did that. And that was really a big catalyst to move to Nashville. After a week of being with both of them, watching Joe do stuff and Andrew do stuff, and then they, help you on your project, how they would mix it or work on it. And at the end of the week, they just kind of sat us down one by one. And I remember talking to them, and they were like, we think you can do this. Like, you have the thing, the drive, the thought, the creativity, but the ability to work with people and communicate. And they just kind of said, you need to move to a city that cares about making music, essentially. So like, you should think about leaving Florida, moving to Nashville, LA, Atlanta, those major cities where people make records. And so I literally, when I got back from there, I told my wife, like, let's move. Let's move to Nashville. Let's quit our jobs and just go. And, that was it. Like, my wife and I have always been, I think because we got married so young and we had nothing and had already been through so much with the band and just life situations, like, we've always been very high risk tolerant people. And so we just packed up our apartment we were in, quit our jobs, and I had one country song lined up to do in Florida, ironically, with Danny. And I just said, hey, we're leaving. I know that sucks for you, like, because my wife manages a studio. I'm part of this thing, but, I'm moving to Nashville. Why don't we do this country song, like, properly? Like, I have some buddies. We can get session players, do, like, the Nashville experience. So I basically moved to Nashville. We didn't have a place to live. We slept on our friend's couch. And there was an ice storm back then. And back then there was like nothing, no salt trucks or anything. Now we kind of have that, even though this past winter we had like a literal apocalyptic ice storm that was like, the city was way underprepared for anything of that magnitude. And they did in my opinion, a terrible job handling it.
Well, coming from Chicago, you've seen winters.
Yes, we've seen winters. But the issue with Nashville is the hills. Like,
Fair.
Chicago, Illinois, I grew up in a cornfield. It's flat from my town for, 180 miles or 160 miles to Chicago. There's not a hill in sight. It's corn. But Nashville, you have the hills. And hills and ice, no good. And so that when we moved here, we were just going to drive to apartment complexes and just pick one. And nobody was open. So we just slept on a couch for like 2 weeks. And then once we got settled, then I had a bass player who's in a country band. It was like, hey, go to this guy's studio. Shout out Michael Hughes, Hartwell Studio, who owns like a really killer home studio in his basement. Carl Tatz did his rooms and everything. So really great, setup. I didn't know who Carl Tatz was then. All of this I didn't know. I'm talking like I knew things. I didn't know anything. He's like, Carl Tatz did it. I was like, great. Is that a person? Is that a brand I don't know? Like, who's Carl Tatz? Anyway, I learned who Carl Tatz was and his Phantom Focus design, which was amazing and is amazing. And I am a huge fan of his approach and method, and especially low-end approach of how to get it right in a room. But yeah, I met Michael. He did me a solid and got great session players from a famous band, essentially. And they all came and played the song in like an hour, which was my first experience of like professionals. And then I saw this value because I had come from like, we're either piecing it together one by one or it takes like 5 days to get something recorded. Like that's just my experience. And then I watched professionals come in. I watched Michael engineer, who's been engineering a long time. And I watched this band play together correctly, I'll say, and run the song down like 3 times. And I remember sitting there, it sounded fantastic. It was like done, like it was great source, great players. And I remember sitting there and Michael was like, I think we got it, and I'm like, looking at my watch, I'm like, we had downbeat at like 9, when you start downbeat, and it was like 10:15 before lunch. And I had told my wife, like, I'm gonna be gone all day. Like, you know how it goes. I'll see you tomorrow. And it was like done by lunch. We had like the mix done by lunch. And then we just needed to fly in the person to Nashville, which we did from Florida. They cut the vocals in like 2 hours. And that's where I like learned, how to like actually melodyne and all that stuff, Yeah. And the singer was good, but it was just it was a very eye-opening experience of being like, there are people that make a living off this. And not only that, they're super good at this. And it's not nearly as stressful once you, like with anything, like you get rid of the unknowns and you get your reps and experience up. And all of a sudden recording a song is no longer scary. It's a Thursday at 10, and that's what you do. So from there, I started doing stuff with Michael, and I was still really recording and mixing stuff with artists and different things. People I would meet, I would bring there, or he would have projects. And I did like a handful of, started getting into the CCM world. And that's when I'll say I got my first, label gig. Was like, I got, the longest story short, I ended up like engineering and mixing a Kari Jobe record many moons ago that was not supposed to be something I was doing, but I was an assistant for it. And the longest story short of that, I don't want to share too many details, but the personnel between there who were working on the record didn't work out. So I got a shot and I did a fine job on it, thankfully. And then that record got mastered by Drew Levine, who was one of my best buds. I didn't master it, and he did a great job. But during that time, I was like mastering everything I was doing outside of that. Like the couple label things I had started on, that was getting sent off to Sterling or whatever. And that was fine. I didn't really think much of it because I was doing these other things that were paying decent. But on the side then, people just started hiring me. I was doing stuff with Michael and like mastering his stuff. And that, I think, people started, I didn't know, but they were like testing me out. So it was like sent to other person, and Michael's like, have Sam do it, just see what it's like. And I started, winning essentially, or getting picked. And Michael kind of told me, hey, I think mastering's like your thing. Like you gravitate towards this process. You seem to like be able to do this much better. Like, he was like, you're a good engineer, competent, decent mixer, But he's like, mastering, when we get to that, he's like, I've worked with enough people to know, like, you have this is your spot you should go to. And he was like, you should rebrand. I was Sam Lightning, which is still my email, Sam Lightning. But I was Sam Lightning, jack of all trades. I can produce, engineer, write, all that. As many people start, because you're just trying to figure out how to make money or how to get into it. And he was like, I think you should just focus on the one thing. He's like, in this town, you can do that. And in this town, you could be just the mastering guy. And he's like, not only that, he's like, with mastering, he was like, specifically, he's like, labels don't want to hire the jack of all trade guy. They want to hire the guy who eats, breathes, and sleeps mastering, because mastering's so weird. And I thought that was so strange again. He was like, I don't even really understand what you're doing. He's like, I go watch you do it. But he's like, the way you're manipulating sound or you think it needs to be, he was like, I don't think that way. And I don't hear that, and it became something where I trusted this guy. He was way far ahead of me in life and in career. And I just thought, oh, great. So I just deleted all my Sam Lightning stuff and did Moses Mastering. That was launched, 16 years ago or whatever, 14, 15. And I just hit the ground running. And I pivoted to, instead of advertising everything, I just niched down. So from then on, if I met you, I'm Sam Moses, I'm a master engineer, I want to help you finish your record. That became my elevator pitch. And I spent a good 2 years coming up with finishing records. And to my knowledge still, I don't think anybody had done that and marketed it that way. Like, I really have not found it. I had not heard of it. And I really wanted to get to the core of what is it that I'm doing, beyond the, it's brighter, it's bigger, it's whatever, it's fairy dust. I didn't like any of that because that's not tangible for marketing or clarity for people.
Yeah. So
I literally wrote down, this was back in the day, there was no AI or anything. You couldn't just be like, what is this? What it's tag on? I have notebooks where I'm writing down, this is what I do. I get the song, I listen to it, I listen to the artists, la, 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 la. They like this, they like that, brighter, blah, 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 blah. What am I doing? I give it to them. And I think one day I was just like, and I finish it. And then it was that. I was like, oh, that's what I'm doing here. I'm finishing a record, bringing peace of mind that's ready to come out, that I've spent enough time in this skill set understanding the difference between the mix and what gets released. I'm, a music fan and lover at the core. And once I had that tagline of I finish records or help bands finish their record, then it was like game on marketing.
That's brilliant, man.
Yeah, I don't divine knowledge, whatever. But I did spend a lot of time thinking through what the heck is this? And why can't anyone put a good sentence together about it?
Yeah.
So I just kind of started doing that, and a lot of people didn't like that. A lot of people were just like, this idiot kid, and I was working out of logic. And I still do, and at one point in my career, I probably 6-7 years into doing this, I got to the luxury where I'll try Sequoia, I'll try everything. I bought it all, switch Pro Tools, this, that. And my workflow and the way I think about how I like to work is just logic. It's just how it is. Man. And I also came from a big, making records with a band and producing and making beats for the band and playing guitar. So I came from very much a heavy hands-on automation and all these things. And from day one, I didn't even know I was automating masters. I didn't know that wasn't really something most people didn't do. But I had watched the producers do it and the engineers do it, ride faders, and the mixer then, hundreds of automations. And then when it got to mastering, it seemed like everybody was like, you're not allowed to do anything. No fun. No fun will be had here. And I remember my mastering when I started with and it still is. It's and it's one of the things I tell people, it's life's too short for boring records. I I think mastering is an emotional process. And I think my main goal is to listen to what the client sends me and make sure that I emotionally understand what they're trying to get across more than anything else. And then that equals the technical side of things.
Absolutely.
And that for me is how I approach things and how I always have, because I think I'm a fan and listener of music first. And what got me into music was that emotional connection, being at a show or, you have a breakup and I'm like crying over a Dashboard Confessional record, like, different things. Like music has always been in my life and I love it. Like most people like me, it's not weird to like music, but when I get a song, and it's always been this way, I listen to it and I honestly, like, my thought is like, would I listen to this as it sits? Am I connected to it? They say they want it to be a breakup song. They say it want to be a party song or club song. They want it to be this and that, which are great things. And then I listen to it and go, well, is that what I'm feeling? And I think for a lot of the times, as you get higher up, the sourcing and everything is much more dialed in. And you have a lot more people who I think understand that. How do you get vibe and emotion from day one and all that. But, like most master engineers, I don't know if they'll tell you this or not, most our work is not label work. Like there's only so many hit records a year. They're going to only be number one spot. There's only 100 spots for top 100, and that's spread out across a lot of people who master. And then below that, you have what most of us do, which is like indie bands you'll never hear of, and they're great people. But like every mastering person I know, for the most part, they make their living off working on records that no one will ever hear, and that's great, and it's wonderful. And you have to be obsessed, I think, with just loving music as a master engineer more than anything. And that's part of like one of the first great mastering guys I got to watch was Eric Kahn at Independent Mastering in town. And when I decided I was going to be a master engineer, I hit up everyone in town and just did the classic, like, hey, I want to learn. I'm willing to do anything, fly on the wall. And he was really the only person who responded and was like, sure, come on over, like, let me meet you and see what's up. And so he let me watch him do things. And the first day I was there, the main thing he told me, he was like, I'm going to teach you how to listen. He was like, all this gear, forget about it. He was like, your number one goal is to learn how to listen. And so he'd play a record and say, what do you hear? And I,
Great
then
question.
it was like, I was like, it's a song, like, don't, it's a song. It's a rock song. He does a lot.
But so many people would go, so many people would just hit play and immediately just start piling on plugins and whatnot, right? So, yeah.
Yeah. And he changed my life with that, and shout out to him. And we were only like, I think I only was there for like 2 months, and they were going through some transitions and a room had opened up for me to like start working, and then it closed up. They filled it with someone else, and that was all fine. I was just tickled to even have a shot, to like learn from someone who actually does this. But that was like the biggest thing. And then when we got into gear, briefly, he told me one day, he was like, I want you to basically make a song sound bright, but you only can use compressors. And then it was make a song sound compressed, but only use EQ. And that was listening training. And then I learned quickly an API doesn't sound the same as a massive passive. Pultecs don't sound the same as massive passive. Solid state tubes, like a Manly Slam limiter doesn't sound the same as an API 2500.
Yeah.
And so, and he had Burl converters, and we got to switch different converters. And I was like, oh, Burl, all converters are 100% not the same, not even close. They have a tone, 100%. And the takeaway was just listening. He was obsessed with listening. I think that's why he's one of the best out there, especially with his career of being in like heavy, back in the day, real live instrumentation country, you know, really big iconic records that were, you know, really well recorded and sourced and sound phenomenal, and where loudness wasn't the main goal. You know, it was like an appreciation of what was captured there more than it needs to beat this record.
So having heard you just say that about the different types of gear and how they impact the sound, like, I'm sure that there's a lot of people who are listening to that and thinking, well, fuck, do I need like a shit ton of gear now?
No.
Is that the only way to get the good results? Like, obviously the listening is a big part of it, but like the tools you're using, you're saying are making this big impact on the sound, right?
This is what you need to know. I built a whole very successful career on a laptop with plugins. That allowed me the luxury to have money to buy gear. That is my story. So when I got really busy mastering, and my wife and I were finally like, okay, this is working. You know, like, this is working, and we can do some math and see if you did this much more, it's this, and this could really work. It's working. It could really work. You know, like, you can have a career. I was like 6 years into it. I was all plugins, you know, and a lot of it was stock Logic. And I will still, I've said it on a lot of different interviews, Logic EQ is my go-to EQ. Still is. I use it on every record. It is my go-to EQ. It has been since day one. It is something I use today on every record. Logic EQ.
I think that also goes back to like what you were talking about earlier with just like choosing Logic, right? It's like sometimes you pick something and you get really good at understanding that tool, and that's more important than whatever other plugins exist. It's just like the speed and the comfort that makes it so much easier to concentrate on what actually matters in the song.
You need to be obsessed with listening. I'm going to keep that thing going. Obsessed with listening and learning what plugins sound like, because every EQ doesn't sound the same, even plugins. Every compressor, even plugins don't sound the same. And you can achieve what you want with plugins. And the gear side of it is just more tools, you know, it's just options. Some stuff benefits from analog. To me, at this stage, analog for me is really good at creating cohesion tie lines, better than plugins. So at mastering, I find that personally to be of high value, because I might get 10 songs from 3 different mixers and producers, and they all sound great, but they're all very different. And I find that running it through a piece of gear will create certain shifts that then feel much more cohesive compared to the plugin version of that piece of gear. It just doesn't have the same 3D image depth. And at the same time, I want to say, I'm the one who knows that. The client doesn't know that. The listener will never know that. I could have not used that gear and, in my opinion, worked a little harder in the box to get the same result, honestly. This is just like how I like to work. And then I always like to think the end goal or the end consumer never knew, nor do they care. Was it a plugin? Was it a piece of gear? They never knew. For me, you know, back in the day when I just was obsessed with learning, what do things sound like? What does an 1176 hardware sound like versus the plugin? The classic debate. They're different.
And there's 40 different 1176s that you can get. So it's like, how do they differ? Yeah.
And who's been maintaining it? You know, I have two 1176 Uris vintage, and as you maintain them, you have to replace things. As soon as you change a wire that's broken, or you clean up a power source because it's noisy now, it's not the same, you know? And that's not good or bad. That's just audio, you know? And even plugins, like plugin emulations change or updates change. And a lot of limiters now, they'll update and the limiter algorithm's different. It's like FabFilter, you know, like everybody's always updating things. And so you have to be, at least for me, I'm obsessed with listening. Anytime there's an update on a plugin, I am obsessed with listening to it and being like, did something change here? Because sometimes there will be. And sometimes plugin companies will tell you, we did nothing different. And then I will have the other version because I was a beta or whatever tester of the original release, and I'll null it, and it doesn't null. Like, something changed.
So then with that said, like, obviously the listening stage is is the most important thing. But when it comes to starting a new project for you, when you know you have something new in your DAW, what's that process look like for you? Like, where do you typically start after listening?
After I listen, I will go to each chorus and measure what it's reading from RMS, dynamic range, and momentary LUFS. And those 3 meters to me are how I can hear a song without hearing it. And a lot of people get hyper focused on, I mean, for so long now it's been LUFS. And God bless LUFS, it's so misunderstood because it's a loudness unit measurement. And it's not a compression measurement at all. You can't tell the dynamic range of a song by a LUFS reading at all. You can't. And we know that because we can just use Spotify as the example. Normalization, it plays back at negative 14 LUFS. And every song on there has a different dynamic range. So how do they all read negative 14 LUFS with drastically different compression dynamic range?
Yeah, there's still some tracks that sound much louder on Spotify than others, even though they're the same.
Yeah. And that's an infinite amount of variables of, you know, is the vocal more up front? Is it a less bass heavy track? Did they squeeze more into the 1 to 5K area? Is it in a playlist or the artist page? Because those are not the same. It's unfortunately with normalization, especially on Spotify, it is a non-linear normalization that's being used. So you could have your song in your album on your artist page sound one way, and then when it's in a different playlist, it might sound quieter or louder. And then you could move it to the next playlist, and now all of a sudden, in one playlist, you were like, oh, it's the loudest song. You know, and technically, it's not. It's negative 14 LUFS. You're perceiving it louder. It's not actually louder. It's being perceived louder because of infinite variables. But the infinite variables are usually vocal placement, kick, snare, attack, brightness versus how much low end, and the exchange of that for volume, low end for volume. But yeah, normalization and all of loudness is unfortunately wildly frustrating for lots of us. And it does not help that algorithms change on all the DSPs constantly. I will say, in my opinion, they've all gotten way better at making things play back at a more consistent volume. Like 5 years ago, it was a hot mess to me. Like it was like drastically feeling different. Now to me, they've narrowed that, whatever they've been updating over the years. It's gotten better and faster at knowing where's this song surrounded by the other songs in the playlist or editorial playlist or album mode. But yeah, to answer your question, after I listen, I go to each chorus. If it's a record or a single, I go to usually the loudest part, the chorus, and I measure RMS, root mean squared, which is basically low end voltage, the voltage of the song, dynamic range, which is the dynamic range between the lowest and the highest peaks, or people think of that as compression, and then LUFS, like the loudness unit. So I take those things, and I think of RMS as like my low end information. I think of dynamic range as my mid-range information, and then I think of LUFS as my top-end information. And those 3 numbers are telling me if the song is bass heavy, mid-range heavy, top-end heavy. Like, they have patterns. And that's for everybody out there that's a hot tip, hot secret, like I've discovered.
Interesting.
And it's in a plugin, my mastering book that's coming out, that is written and is in V4 of final edit and layout and will be shopped to educational spaces first. But I would imagine in the next 12 months that book will be out, and there's a whole section on how I think of those meters, how I've studied them for 16 plus years, and how there are very distinct patterns that happen to achieve a certain end goal sound. And you can manipulate then either your compression or your EQ tone to manipulate those 3 numbers to give you almost any end goal you want. If you want to be the loudest, it needs to look like this. If you want to be conservative, this. If you want to sound like a Chris Stapleton record, which is heavy dynamics, not the loudest records out there, it needs to look like this. Every song, this is what's cool about music, is it's math, it's math. And then you have emotion, and you marry those two, and then in my opinion, at this stage, making records or finishing records on my end as a mastering engineer is not a mystery anymore. And that's not like that it's not fun. It actually, for me, has equipped me to handle, my discography is a massive genres. It's not one. And I think a lot of my clients, and why I do like a lot of indie client stuff, is I'm getting a lot of just emotion, but sonically it would not be perfect. And then I can do my readings of my meters and go, okay, it looks like this on meters. I'm hearing this. This is what I think the most important thing is the emotional connection. What are they trying to emotionally get across? And how do I then use the technical things such as gear or plugins or meters or whatever to hit that emotional goal? Yeah. And I ask all my clients, what's your goal? And the funny thing is almost none of them have ever thought about that. They're just like, I want to make a song. And I'm like, that's terrific. I do too. Like, but what do you hope? Like, is this song one for you, or is this your 5th album? Yeah. Do you want to get on Spotify editorial playlists? Is that the goal? Are you trying to grow your fan base? I'm a team player. I learned very early on by reading lots of business books, which was a catalyst to my growth of learning. And most people fail in this because a lot of us are just creative brains. And so many people still, I just want to make music. I don't want to have to post. I don't want to have to market, blah, blah, blah. That is great. But we are in the music industry, music business, $1 billion, multi-billion dollar business is what I'm a part of. So if you want to be a part of that, you need to learn how the game is played. And that's business at the end of the day. You can yell about that being good or bad. That's not real art. They don't care about the art. I think there's a nice balance of most people do care about the art. They also care about eating food and having a house. Like, they also care about having money to continue to make music forever, And I've yet to meet an artist who might complain about this, that, and the other. And if you were making 150 grand a year off your songs, would you like that? And they're like, yeah, of course. I'm like, and that's normal. It's great.
Yeah, of course. I know. I always say that with people when they're like, when they criticize another artist, so-and-so pop artist comes out, oh, their songs suck. It's like, well, maybe they do suck, but they're really good at like understanding the other side of the business and putting it all together. Yeah. Whereas like you may have the greatest songs in the world, but if you don't know how to market yourself, those songs are just going to live in your basement. So you have to figure it out. So going back to what you were talking about when it comes to like the RMS and the LUFS and the dynamic readings that you said that those will often inform a lot of your decisions in terms of what gear you're going to choose or how you process things. Could you give us an example of like, what are some of those things that you typically see on each of those meters and how would you react to those
absolutely.
levels?
So usually most of the time I'm getting like a hot ref, like a limited version, which is what the artist and client and even indie bands do this a lot, where they have their mixer or they themselves have like their faux master essentially on it. And then I usually, and a lot of the mixers will send like a pre-master. So it's basically the chain minus the limiter usually. So then it has actual transients and like, headroom, meaning like dynamic range for me to, in my opinion, do what they were attempting to do better in that faux master ref. Because that hot ref that's been approved is obviously what everybody's listening to. No one's heard this pre-master, so you run a risk of it is different. But that limited version is carrying emotional weight, in my opinion. And so I will measure like that hot ref usually in the chorus or the loudest part. And a simple example would be if I'm looking at those 3 numbers, RMS, dynamic range, and LUFS. In LUFS, I do momentary. So LUFS is momentary, short term, or integrated. Momentary is basically like milliseconds at a time. But since I'm right on the loudest part of the song,
it's going to be the loudest
reading I want. Yeah. I don't want the average, which is how normalization works on the DSP side, is like an average basically. So I'm going by momentary because I want to be the loud. I want to know what is our loudest. And so if the RMS is higher than LUFS, so if that number is, say, -5 RMS, and LUFS is showing -6, I know that song is going to be bassier than brighter.
Interesting.
If I'm at that spot and LUFS is -4 and LUFS is -8, I know that song is bright as crap. Bright as can
Sorry,
be.
if the RMS is -4 and LUFS is 8.
No, if the RMS is -8, so there's less RMS now. That means usually when we're at full scale, so fully up to 0, they're limited ref, and where we take records, full scale, like finalized. If the RMS is lower, meaning more, less of it than the LUFS. So LUFS like -4, right in that loudest spot, momentary, and RMS is like -8. I know there's less bass because bass eats up the most voltage. So RMS is a voltage measurement essentially, like how much voltage and what eats up the most voltage. Low end. That is your headroom eater. So that's why low end is so important in general of getting right. Why so many people struggle with it is A, they don't even have 65 hertz and below in their monitor setup. That's a problem. You don't even hear it. But B, they don't understand how much room it takes up in a song because you have a finite amount of voltage. And RMS is, essentially the average voltage. So you can look at between RMS and LUFS and basically know your top and bottom end and how a song's going to sound. So, I might take that reading, say I'm noticing it's really bright and not bassy, but they might have the note of like, we want this to be round and thick. Sometimes we just feel like it doesn't ever fill the speaker sound as big as the commercial record they're going after. I'll go to commercial record on Spotify, normalization off. It's got to be off because you don't want the normals that you want to see in theory where it actually was on full scale. I use Audio Hijack, and Audio Hijack allows me to use all my plugins and meters in real time, and I will go to that loudest song they've been chasing and look at that ratio. Turns out that ratio, has a bit more bass. And the dynamic range, to me, people may not like this. I think it's when you're at full scale, we're talking about modern loudness, so very compressed records. I find compression is very reactive to mid-range. That's my opinion. Now, obviously, whatever's the highest threshold, depending on what compressor, that's what it's going to attack. But I find that my dynamic range is like the middle ground between RMS and LUFS. And so then I just look at that record and go, well, it's reading this way. It's got more bass. RMS is higher. So there must be something in there. And then I look at the LUFS. If the LUFS is the same, then I'm like, okay, this hit record is probably smiley faced then because it's got the same amount of top end LUFS as this one. Now, obviously, when we're talking about this, people who are listening, don't get all, frustrated or flustered. Use your brain. These are just philosophies. Obviously, lots of things impact a LUFS reading. Same with RMS, same with dynamic range. But this is just what I've observed over 16 plus years, tens of thousands of records, doing the work for you. You're welcome. And studying them, that there are patterns that appear. And if you go back then to your song that you're trying to make sound like hit song, and you start adding bass and you get your RMS to all of a sudden read similar to that song, and then you A/B between what you had and what you got now and the hit song and your current now song where you say you boosted the low end or maybe used a thicker limiter with tubes to get some beef out of the bottom or a saturator to get the low end to pop out more. All of a sudden you're like, oh, it feels, I'm about emotion. It feels, I'm very technical in theory, but I hear it and then I go, oh, it has a feeling. The speaker's full now. Feels like the commercial record, where their record felt thin, and knowing at this stage in this sort of system, it'll be hollowed out and won't be flying out of the speaker, And that's, I'm like obsessed with studying and listening. So that's kind of how I use those 3 readings.
So then are you using, when it comes to that dynamic range and adding compression to get the results that you're looking for, are you typically doing like multi-band to So you're not focused on mid-range specifically with the compression that you're doing?
No, and I actually don't even use compressors. I only use limiters. Like, I don't use compressors. I just never have liked the way they respond in modern loudness. And that's what I operate in. Like, I operate and grew up and started at like the starting of heavily compressed records. And limiters are essentially compressors with infinite ratios. But I don't like grab an SSL G comp or an API 2500 or you name it, Manly Slam, not in comp mode, in limiting mode. I'm a limiter person. That's what I like to use.
Well, you were talking about how dynamic range impacts the mid-range. So I was curious about like, how do you infuse that mid-range and are you,
Sorry, you're talking about multi-band.
Yeah, I was asking about multi-band. Yeah.
Yes, I don't use multi-band like 98% of the time. The only time I would use it is if I got a note back from a client that might say like, hey, this feels a little essentially wild, bottom end or mid-range or top end. And they have a very specific now, all of a sudden, idea that they need accomplished. Where I could easily tell them, well, that's how your mix is. Like, so. But that's not my job. My job is to serve them, hear them, be another safety net for them of things people notice things all the time all of a sudden at mastering because they've been too close to the song.
Sure.
And then they have a day off or a week off if it's not coming for a week. Then they rehear it. Yes, mastering changes things, but I do a very good job, in my opinion, and my clients would agree, of honoring what is there and highlighting the best of that song emotionally and focusing everything on that. So with like the multi-band or the mid-range, I pick limiters that highlight mid-range and seem to respond well to mid-range. For me, the hardware version that I am obsessed with and have been forever after shooting out a bunch of limiters is the Better Maker mastering limiter. Like the version 1 hardware that came out, I think I was probably one of the first people to buy that ever from Vintage King when they were advertising it. And that is like a mid-range king to me. Like, it's so good with the mid-range. It doesn't do great, in my opinion, with heavy bass material. So you have to position it how you want in your chain. But it's amazing on mid-range loudness. And the color sections are incredible on it too for mid-range saturation with the odd and even harmonics.
So then would you say that like with this relationship of dynamic range and limiters being like focusing on mid-range, do you think that you've come to that conclusion because of the limiters that you're choosing? Or like, does this apply to any limiter that you're using?
Great question. I feel like with any limiter I'm picking, I like limiters for mid-range. Is that a fine answer?
Well, obviously, I mean, going back to what you talked about earlier, just like understanding the sound of your gear and how it matters.
Yeah, that's
right.
What
it
is.
I could see people taking this advice and being like, okay, cool, and I'm going to put a limiter on now.
Right.
And am I not getting the same results because I'm not using that limiter? Or
oh no, you can use any. I mean, every limiter has a different sound, and even within the Fab filter or like the Ozone, like they all have their character settings essentially between like, the Fab filter, like modern versus aggressive versus transparent versus safe versus bus mode, and an Ozone IRC, 1, 2, 3, 4 transient mod. There's like 40 options now in the character, and they all sound, in my opinion, drastically different. And so I have picked the ones that sound mid-rangey to me and make mid-range really loud. And I use EQ for my bass and my top end essentially. And then I pick my limiter to make the mid-range really compact essentially. More loud, more often, because our ears are sensitive mid-range, and mid-range is on every speaker from cheap 10 cents earbuds to, a home theater. So it's a matter of me picking tools and signal chains that to me honor the emotion the artist wants to get across, and then me having, learned the experience and knowledge of, okay, then how do I take that and make sure it translates to consumer devices?
For sure. And then obviously, like, I think a lot of times we talk about like references on this podcast, and a lot of people listen to music.
Oh,
but,
yeah.
I mean, it's obviously something has to feel right and sound right, but like you're taking it this extra level of comparing the songs you're working on versus the reference that they're sending you and looking at the numeric value of these things.
Yeah.
So then is the goal that as you're doing this, are you trying to match those numbers, or are you still like heavily reliant on like the sonics of it? I mean, I'm sure that obviously there's a correlation between the two, right? But
yeah, heavily, always emotion. Emotion always wins. The emotional intent of what they send over, I will make sure that's still there unless they have a specific note, which, 1 out of every 10 projects comes in where they don't like the mix, and they might have hired big time person, and big time person said, this is what you get. You got 4 revisions or I'm done, move on. That's like 1 out of 10 is people come to me going, this is what we got. This is what we want. Is that what, they're also gonna ask me, is that what you're hearing? We think this is the problem. Do you think that's the problem? Sometimes I'll listen and go, you know what? I think this mixer did a great job. This is a great mix. This is punching. So at that stage, if there's a disconnect where I think it is doing what they think it's not, then I get the fun job. And that's what I like about a job, is learning more about that person. How do they communicate? Or what I've learned is, what is their fear in this? A lot of people's requests at mastering, and probably all through the music creation process, is fear-based. That's the loudness thing. The loudness is fear-based. They're scared that when they hit their song, when it comes out on Spotify and they compare it to their hit record that they love, that it sounds slightly quieter. And if it's slightly quieter, they assume that means they won't become famous. That's really it. They lump that one notch of click on your earbud to my whole career in life and everything I've invested. That's reality. I deal with it every week. The amount of times I have to answer the question of my last release from this master engineer sounds quieter than this song. I look up who mastered it, and it doesn't really even matter at this stage. I'll listen to the song that came out. Most time it's good. I'm like, this is a great master. This is a great engineer who did it. So, it's probably knows what they're doing, I hope. And then I always have to tell them kindly, which is, I could find 100 songs right now. I can make you a playlist on Spotify where your song is the loudest, and then I can make you another playlist where your song now all of a sudden is the quietest, because of how the algorithm works and how LUFS filtering works. And helping them understand that, then why don't you go to the top 50 top songs on Spotify, the viral editorial or the just New Music Friday. I want you to go down that list, and I promise you within 3 songs, you're going to have to change your volume. Because Billie Eilish is this loud, Drake is this loud, and some EDM song is this loud, and that song just sounds loud. It's just always loud. More loud, more often, as bright as can be. You think it's bassy, it's not. It's the tangible attack of the kick, the click sound that you hear on an iPhone. And then they're like, oh, well, yeah, I guess my favorite artists all lined up are different. But people I feel like part of my job as master engineer is to be like therapist, and help people. My goal is always to reignite the fire in them for their song and bring peace of mind that it's ready to come out, and bring peace of mind that let's celebrate that you made a song, that it's coming out. And thank God the best song isn't the loudest song. We have so much data of songs that are not the most compressed or even perceived as loud, not being the most popular song. It's almost never that. I don't know if I don't want to say never, because the word is never. So that's an absolute. But you could go down the Grammy winners or the Billboard charts or the People's Choice Awards, whichever award you want to go down, and you will find all those songs measured differently. And that to me is great. That's what we want. We want to know that we can make our art. And of course, we strive for it to emotionally translate correctly, make sure it's translating the story and the producer's vibe and the artist's goal and that it's meeting the goal they're after. But thankfully, thank God, we are allowed to focus on that, honestly, and that's what moves the marker more than it sounds louder than this song, quieter than this song.
I was going to say, like, the obvious question, I think, to follow up with this then would be, like, what loudness level do you aim for? Like, I
don't aim for anything.
I know there's no consistent, but, like, I feel like a lot of mastering engineers have, like, their average starting point where they know it's kind of loud, but, like...
I don't.
No.
I literally do not. I will take those measurements, take that as a data set, and then the emotion always wins. And that's that.
So it's almost like the target has to do more with a reference as a starting point.
Yeah, it's a starting point. It gives me really quick information to essentially run by what they think their song sounds like and the song they're going for. It's a undisputable number system that doesn't care what you throw at it. It's going to spit out a number. It's like getting, I don't know, a doctor test or blood work. It's this. This is the range. Here's where you are. It's there. And like, it helps me immediately get a ballpark of their song's too bassy compared to the song they want, and how does that relate to how they think it sounds? And I then get those 3 points of data and go, okay, well, let's marry these 3 together and listen to the song and keep the emotion going. Every record I do, there is no number, no thing I am looking for ever. I've never done that. This is just Sam's approach. This is not gospel.
But you do great work, so that's why I'm very curious about this.
Well, thank you. No, there is no number. There's nothing I look for outside of the only time I will be caring about my 3-meter readings is on a full-length record. But that's not in comparison to another commercial record in theory. I want to make sure the record feels cohesive as a whole from start to finish. So that's where, I had my markers and logic for not every, this is part of why I don't use mastering DAWs. I do a lot of blending and automation and parallel stuff. Like I master like a mixer. But B, I set up my markers and hot points and stuff. And I can skip then to the loudest part of each song. And it should read very closely the same on those 3 readings for a record. I found if I do that, no one ever is like, not no one. 98% of the time people are like, I don't know how you did it. Every song, I don't have to go up or down, As long as the mixing is semi-consistent, this banks on it not being a hot mess of a record. And hot mess sounds negative. It banks on it, most people being consistent in their own work.
So then how do you know when you're done mastering?
I am done mastering when I have hit the end goal that they had, which is I listen to a record, I ask them what the goal is, the emotional intent, and then I do that.
You help them finish the record the way they wanted it.
I help them finish her. Yeah, it's a terrible answer, but it's the real answer for me is I know I am done when I listen to it in my own, of course, personal bias. I go, yeah, I think this is emotionally what they were trying to convey. And there is a little bit of with all of this, there's always, would I listen to this? How it's sitting right now. Like I am obsessed with, like I've said, music and listening to things. And I always listen to a song and think through, if this came on right now, me being obsessed critical listener, but also super huge fan of music, would I feel like I need to be in my car adjusting the bass and mid and like that. But really, it's just, I don't overcomplicate it. The record is done when I have done the due diligence I think is required as a good engineer, which is learning what your client is going for. What is their goal? And I find part of my growth over the 16 years and where I've gotten to, I've asked people because I'm just curious, like, why me? Why do you keep coming back? And they almost always say it's because I listen to them. Like, it's not transactional. It's a relationship above all else. It's me earning their trust that I care more about getting across their emotion and their art, and then using my technical skill set that I've grown over the years and continue to grow to best support that. I don't know how engineers, and I think this is where they get tripped up. I don't know, I think a lot of people struggle with when is something done, and it's because they haven't put any sort of boundaries around the goal and purpose of it. And I think that's at each stage. When producers are like, do I need to add another kick drum sample? The mixer's like, could it be more reverb? And I find a lot of people, and master engineers go, does it need another plugin, another dB of compression? And unless you have decided to put boundaries around what your goal is, and the client's goal, it's really hard then to call anything done. It's like, I've described it as like, if you're making a pizza, I love pizza, all varieties of pizza, deep dish, Detroit, Neapolitan, grandma pizza, they're all pizzas. So like, they're all songs at the hierarchy, the parent, and then there's like the sub genres. But if you want to make like, if I gave you, flour and yeast and water and cheese and tomato and said, make a pizza, what kind are you making? Detroit, New York, Neapolitan? As soon as we pick, my goal tonight is eat a thin, crispy, leopard charred Neapolitan thin pizza, like from Italy, boom. We got to be at least 750 degrees in the oven, wood fire preferred. We have to have the dough be on a cold ferment for 3 days. We need San Marzano tomatoes, ideally. That's natural there. And we need very little cheese. That's Neapolitan. And then, when is a Neapolitan pizza done? When you see the charring, it's usually a minute and a half at 750 to 900 degrees. Leopard char on the crust with little black char spots. The topping cheese has melted quickly and you're done. Compared to like Chicago style, which is like a heavy bread crust, bread flour, Neapolitan's 00 flour, but like bread crust and, Chicago styles, deep dish, it's going to be in the oven for 45 minutes. And you might reverse the toppings. So like the cheese is under the sauce, which is very Chicago
I love
style.
it. That's actually like a perfect way of describing it. And yeah.
But that's to me what I think about with audio, any stage, and with mastering is I think everybody in this industry loves music. We all want the same goal. We want to make a great record. I hope, and I'm big on always telling people like, I'm on your team. And I feel like so much what I see and I've seen over the years is people get to each stage, unfortunately, and have been burned, by people who just aren't good with people, or people who, unfortunately, with the internet, and I'm not going to go down a tangent of it, but who say, I'm a professional this, you hire them, they give back a not professional product, then this client essentially is going, gosh, if this is professional, all professionals suck, or you lied to me, or a combo of both. And that's the unfortunate place we find. I find a lot of my indie clients have wasted a lot of time and money on people claiming to be professional, or their mixer now all of a sudden is the master engineer because they want to make 50 more bucks. They go through that, and all of a sudden, unfortunately, the mixer did a great mix, and then they tossed a bunch of stuff on it, and now all of a sudden the band is like, wait, what happened to our song?
Yep.
Like, we love the mix, but we know the mix can't come out yet.
Yeah.
So anyway, when something is done by having boundaries and constraints, in my opinion. And I find if you do that, it's so dang helpful for you as the engineer of what you need to focus on. And also then you have clarity and accountability. This is what I love about what it creates. It creates accountability between you and the client. Once you get the client to say, my goal is to be on Spotify editorial playlists, in pop fresh finds, we have an end destination, So then I can go to that playlist, quickly listen to what's there currently, measure a few of those songs that they mentioned, and we have kind of this boundary. And then I have to tell them, well, to get on there too, unfortunately, it's not always organic.
Fair.
Like, people pay to get there.
That's a whole other thing.
So there's that. So let's make sure that, yeah. But I'm a realist. Like, I'm not scared of there is so much that happens beyond the product, which is the song,
I love it, man.
And I always love to just paint to my clients, this is how this works. The game you're entering, I always tell people, it's a game. The game you're entering has a lot of stuff going on. And you not landing an editorial playlist doesn't mean your song isn't worthy of that. You know, I'm constantly trying to encourage people to be like, you don't understand that there's infinite things at play that make some people get seen more and some people not. Like, and that's the reality. And you've got to have a very good mental or hard, tough skin, you know, even as an engineer, even as you're more successful. This is something that I learned strangely over the last like 4 years as I've done more label work, and people are like, I know your work. Is you don't realize then people are actually listening to your work. Where before, no one gave a crap for my first 10 years. You know, it was like a bunch of really great clients and artists and mixers, but it was like one of those things where none of them are gold, platinum, Grammy, dub, blah, blah. So most people are not hearing it. And, you know, then you do a record that does well, and now all of a sudden, everybody's like, who did that? Who did that? So now you have all the engineers at the top going, who did that? And then you have a lot of consumers going, who did that? And then you have A&R going, who did that? And all of a sudden, people like to talk about your work, which is really weird. You know, because for a lot of people, even as an artist too, I've had artists go through this where they went for years and years and years and no one cared. And now all of a sudden everybody cares. And all of a sudden they're like, oh my gosh, I don't like this. You know, like didn't realize that to be popular meant you're popular. You know, like it means 1 million people now go in 10 seconds, that sucks, or I love it. And before that, you never heard anything. You just were doing some work, you know, having fun, and you're still having fun. But that's something even as I've gone along is like, you know, as the work has gotten seen or listened to by more people, it's like, gosh, I remember the first time a bigger engineer, you know, basically told me I sucked. You know, basically like I was doing it wrong. My method's wrong. Or they heard clipping. And I'm like, I don't know. Like, I liked it. They liked it. The consumer clearly likes it. It's, you know, 100 million streams and like they like, I don't know. Like, I don't know. And it's a weird place to be, I think, for anyone that we all work so hard to essentially make a living. And often when you're making a living, then you are probably, as a result, doing work that someone will eventually hear that you respect, you know, or you'll be in the spotlight at some point. And that's just it's a weird thing too of that, of being like, oh, wow, okay, this guy thinks I suck now. Or people say he's overpriced, or people say, I've had people tell me I'm just an influencer, I'm not a master engineer. Like, I have Reddit haters now. Like,
it comes with popularity.
It's wild to find your name on Reddit and people are all of a sudden talking about you and what they think about you. I would never, I told my wife, like, I was like, I can't imagine what it's like to be actually popular. Because I'm not popular. I'm just in this little niche. You know, we're, especially mastering, I'm in a niche where like there's 1,000 of us total, or there's probably more, but like, you know, like it's very niche. And then if you happen to be able to do it, it's even more niche. So then it's very easy to have a spotlight on you in a very niche community. But I can't imagine like, you know, a Justin Bieber or anything like that. Oh my gosh. I understand why people act the way they act when they are zero privacy and literally you can't get away from people telling you what they think about you and your life and your work, and they don't know anything about you. It's wild.
Sure. Yeah. Dude, again, this has been amazing. Like I've loved learning more about this process, and I think you brought a really fresh perspective to things to pay attention to on the podcast, which is great. I love that.
Yeah.
So thank you so much for doing this. If people want to learn more about you or even work with you, like what's the best way for them to do that?
MosesMastering.com is my website, or Instagram, Moses Mastering.
Awesome.
You can DM me, or on my website, the immediate is book a session. On the front page, click that, fill out the form, and you will get me. No one else.
Love it.
Just me. which is a whole other day of conversation of trying to scale and assistance I've had.
Dude, we'll have to have you back. I feel like we can go on for hours about this stuff. So yeah, man.
Okay, great.
Dude, I appreciate all of your time here today. And I think people are going to really like this.
Of course, Mike.
Awesome.
Oh, wonderful. Thank you for having me. Everyone out there, thank you for your time. Don't be a stranger. Come say hi.
So that was my interview with Sam Moses. I found that conversation extremely interesting, especially around that idea of his 3 metering system, where you've got the RMS to determine the low end, the momentary LUFS to determine the brightness, and the dynamic range to determine the mid-range. I think that that's a really interesting approach, and I've never really made that correlation between those values and sonically what that sounds like. So my mind's racing right now in terms of paying attention to that on some of the upcoming masters that I've got to do myself. I just think it's a really interesting approach to give you a sense of direction in terms of where to start. And although it's not like a technical target that you need to hit with all of these things, it definitely gives you some direction and gives your ears something to think about so that you can then base your decisions off of what you're hearing. And obviously, like, you know, he talked a lot about how feel is such a big thing and getting the emotional response out of people. And you know, that's always going to just come down to your ears and feeling like you've reached that. But if going into a project, you're not sure of where you want to go with it, and these numbers can give you some direction, that's awesome. I think that just really gives you something to work with and will help you get results faster. So I thought that whole part of the conversation was really, really interesting. I also thought it was great to hear him talk about loudness and how it relates to Spotify and how it isn't just about LUFS. You know, the fact that every song can sound different. Some songs are going to sound brighter or darker or louder or quieter, even though technically they're all the exact same LUFS value on Spotify. I think it's an important thing to understand that concept too. And I thought Sam did a great job of explaining the various things that go into making something sound louder and how it ties into that measurement system that he talked about earlier. And then lastly, the focus on listening. It sounds obvious that you know, we're in a listening-driven process where we have to do things that make it sound pleasing to our ears. But to take it to the level that Sam talks about here, where it's about understanding the variances in different types of gear and how that impacts the sound, or taking it to the level of making tracks that feel cohesive with each other, whether it's on an album or whether it's on a playlist on Spotify or whatever, you have to be very in tune with that. And when you're aware of it, it just allows you to work faster, work smarter, be more confident in your decisions because you're not guessing. You have a very specific, intentional way of working or picking the types of gear that you're going to use to achieve that goal and to ultimately help finish your records the way that Sam talked about here. So yeah, I think that like not enough of us do the work of really paying attention to those minute differences between different types of gear. But when you do, it's going to help you get a result faster. So definitely make that part of your practice. And if you're not working on a project, open up a project and just listen and try out all of the different versions of your 1176s or whatever. By doing that, you're going to gain so much more of an understanding in terms of when and where you want to use something. So I thought that was great advice that Sam shared here today. And it all just comes down to being intentional. If you want something to sound finished, you have to know the steps to get there. And for so many of you, I know from the conversations that I have with people on a regular basis, so many of you are just guessing. You don't know what tools to be using. You don't know what order to be listening for. You don't know how to decide when you need a slow attack versus a fast attack or something like that. If you're struggling with understanding that, if you feel like you're just guessing your way through the process and you want some direction, that's exactly what I help my students with inside of my coaching program, Amplitude. And in that program, I'm working one-on-one with my students to help make their visions come to life. We establish what it is you want things to sound like, where you want it to go, and I'll walk you through the entire recording, editing, and mixing process, holding your hand basically step by step, hopping on calls with you, workshopping everything, making sure that you're actually implementing it properly. And as you do implement it, I'm in your corner giving you feedback and directions so that you can feel confident that you're getting the sound you want. So if you're interested in learning more about that program, make sure to check out masteryourmix.com/amplitude. And on that page, you can get all the details. But also on that page, I'm currently offering free production clarity calls. These aren't a sales call. These are just a call to learn more about your goals and your process right now and to see if we can identify at the very basic level, like where are the gaps in your process? Where should you be putting your energy into so that you can actually bust through your plateaus and actually start to see some results? Now, you may think that you have a mixing problem, or maybe we discover that it's not actually a mixing problem. It's more of a recording problem. And so we'll talk about how to navigate through that. But that's what these calls are all about. It's just giving you some direction in terms of where to go. And if it seems like I can help you beyond the call, and if you're interested in getting help, we can talk about that too. But this is really just a call to help you get some direction. So again, if you're interested in learning more about that and booking your free production clarity call, that's available at masteryourmix.com/amplitude. With that said, we're at the end of this episode. Thank you so much for sticking around, and I can't wait to chat with you in the next one. We'll talk soon. Have a good one. Take care. Thanks for listening to the Master Your Mix podcast. Please make sure to subscribe on your favorite podcast app and leave a review. If you have any questions or comments for the podcast, send an email to questions@masteryourmix.com. And for more information on how to create pro recordings from your home studio, visit masteryourmix.com.